but neither one of you are willing to take responsibility for it. So that's a very interesting power relationship example as well. Now, if there's a parallel power relationship, it's situational shifting of power. So if you think about parallel lines, they're both heading in the same direction, they're close to each other, but in the parallel power relationship, you have situational shifting. So at this point, one person has the power, then it shifts to the next person that has the power, then it shifts back, then it shifts back. But you have to keep in your mind, at least for me, a visual person, two straight lines. There's no deviation, there's no zigzagging, there's no back and forth, there's no curlicues. So it's situational. So at one point this person has power, the next point this person has power, but it's a pretty consistent parallel power relationship. So if we talk about types of power, this is very interesting to keep in mind when you are interacting in different situations and different environments, because you will learn very quickly that the types of power, if you are aware of them and you're knowledgeable about them, you will have a better sense of the relationship as it's developing. So legitimate power is based on respect for a position. So when I think of that, I think of, someone who you respect for what they do. So that may be first responders, so firemen, policemen, things like that. It could be people who are the pastors or priests or rabbis at your place of worship. It could be people who you admire because of who they are. You may know a lot about a philanthropist that you really respect them for what they do. So that is legitimate power. It's true power, it's deserved power. Now, referent power is a type of power because we like them. So that might be your best friend, it might be someone in your family. You give them power because you like them. So it's more of a willful choice that you're making there. Now, expert power, you grant power to an expert. So that could be a professor, it could be a very wise person in your family, like an older person in your family, your great-grandfather or someone. It could be someone who, if you're really into, computers, and you think that Mark Zuckerberg is an expert in social media with computers, so you grant power to them because they are an expert in that field. So that's expert power. That's pretty easy to remember. Reward power, interesting, is based on the partner's ability to satisfy your needs. So the more a person satisfies your needs, the more reward power you give them. And remember, we talked about early on, especially in dependent relationships, when you give someone power, you are letting them meet your needs. So reward power is that type of power that's granted. It's almost like I'm awarding you for meeting my needs. Now there's coercive power, which is when a person uses punishment to influence. So if that's the case, I think most of you are probably familiar with the term coercion. And so you're basically being manipulative or using punishment. That would be a strong motivator to influence the person. So you're going to be coercive, you're going to be manipulative, you're going to be conniving sometimes maybe to get people to do what you need. And then persuasive power it's just based on well-reasoned arguments. So you might be a person, actually, funny story, for as long as I can remember, my father has told me that I should have been a federal prosecutor, because he has told me my entire life that I can argue and argue and argue and turn every statement that someone makes around back in my favor. And I've tried to work on that. I don't particularly like that people see that about me. So I have tried to improve in that area. But if you can have a well-reasoned argument that people really have a difficult time refuting, that is persuasive power. You're persuading them to your point of view. And often that's done with well-reasoned arguments. Look, this is what I believe, this is why. If you have good rational justification for it or logical thinking about it, you're persuading the people in your relationship to agree with you. All right, so if you want to negotiate power, we've talked about the principles of power, so managing power, and then types of power. Now, if you want to negotiate power, here are some tips. You decide how much power to give away. We've already talked about that. But it is usually based on weighing the costs of not giving it away. So let me let you ponder that for a minute. You decide how much power to give away, but it is usually based on weighing the cost of not giving it away. And when I was in, I guess, my master's program, one of my all-time favorite professors said a quote, and it wasn't her quote, she had gotten it from somewhere, but I have never forgotten it. And she said, "People will change when the pain of change is less painful than the pain of things staying the same." And I always think about that quote when I'm thinking about power, because it's kind of a similar context. You are deciding how much power you're going to give away, but how you are making that decision is based on weighing the costs of not giving it away. So if I fight for power in this relationship, what is that going to cost me? And am I willing to accept that cost? If not, then I will give more power to the other person. So it's a very delicate dance of negotiating power in that situation. Now, how do you negotiate power for yourself? You assess your needs. We talked about having your needs met, having your goals met. Huge motivator for communication. So when we are thinking about needs, we will think about everything from financial needs to self-concept needs to raising a family to anything you can think of, any need you may have. We assess those. We know what we need, we know what we want, so that's a constant process that we go through of assessing our own needs. Then we take that further and we assess our need fulfillment. So is the person in this relationship with me meeting my needs? Are my needs being fulfilled? And vice versa. So it's not something that you do independently. There's always a mutual assessing of needs. So the other person will be continually assessing their needs and continually assessing their need fulfillment from you as well. Now, relationships that meet limited needs can easily be replaced by ones that meet many needs. So you may have people that are in your life and they don't really offer you very much. Sorry. At this point, you come to expect it, I'm sure. Okay, so relationships that meet limited needs, that might be people who are in your life because they're your family or because you don't have a choice, you work with them or you live with them or whatever. So, sometimes we just are in relationships with people because that's just the way that it needs to be in that moment. If they're not meeting your needs, we will almost always seek out other relationships that will meet those needs, and the relationship kind of gets replaced. It may still be there, but the significance of the relationship, the importance of the relationship, the impact of the relationship is lessened when it's replaced by a relationship that meets many of your needs. And then we identify need-based conflicts and tensions. So if we want to determine where the conflicts and tensions are coming from, we look at the role of power and then, of course, by default, power imbalances. So if we assess our needs, then we assess our need fulfillment and we say, my needs are not being met, that's going to create a conflict or a tension because one of our major goals is to have our needs met. So then we have to look at the role of power in our relationships and if there's a power imbalance. So am I giving to you and I'm meeting all of your needs and you're not meeting any of mine? That's a power imbalance. So that can create those conflicts and tensions, and that's how you negotiate the power in the relationship. You have to identify what those conflicts are, what they're rooted in, and then look at if the power imbalance exists. And then for me, one of the easiest ways that I can encourage you to negotiate power is directly discuss them. It's not something that most people think about, so we obviously don't talk about it either. But conflict management, that's very important, and we'll actually spend some time in the future talking about conflict management. We sometimes have to do that to clarify and negotiate power issues. sometimes we don't have a choice. Nothing's going to change unless we are the impetus for the change. And so when we do that, we can be calm and factual and avoid personal attacks, all the things we've talked about up to this point that make us better communicators and effective communicators. We use those skills when we discuss power issues. We use our I statements. We don't use blaming statements. We reflect other people's feelings. We try to be other-oriented. All of those things will help manage those conflicts and tensions when you're discussing the power issues. Okay, so for your activity this week, you are stranded on an island and you must decide on another person to join you on this deserted island. So your choices are a farmer, a model, a minister, or a communication professor. Smile. So what I would like you to do is, as you make your decision, keep these things in mind. Each choice is same age, gender, race, and physical build. So I don't want you to think, oh, well, I'm going to pick a model because they're going to be the best looking. Every person that you have to choose from, the only difference is their occupation. So they're all the same age, they're all the same sex, they're all the same race, and they all have the same physical build. So you can eliminate all of those generalizations and just focus on the occupation. So you're basically saying, do you want a farmer, a model, a minister, or a communication professor for what they can offer you with their skills? Okay, so that is what I want you to answer for your activity for this week. And then additionally, if you think about if you could pick, okay, granted, you may have different rationales or reasons for why you chose who you did, but in context of power, if you're going to be only with one other person, stranded on an island for who knows how long, Gilligan didn't think he was going to be there as long as he was. So you might think, oh, well, we can get rescued in a few days. What if you're there for years? So if you're thinking about this in context of power, if you're going to pick, consider the power balance, the power differential, the interactions, the conflicts, the tensions. How is that all going to play out, especially if relationships are based on having our needs met? So that's what I'd like you to think. And then as one further thing, discuss the dynamics of the selection process. And that doesn't have to be in-depth or long or detailed, but after you decide and after you pick in terms of power who you would want, briefly discuss the dynamics of that selection process. So how did you come to the decision that you made? Okay, so please make sure that you post your reflection in the discussion board with this activity and with thoughts about the lecture, thoughts about the chapter, and I will talk to you next week.